All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up view components in Rails so that you can create components and keep your code super organized, just like all the cool kids working with React and those front-end frameworks. So let's jump in. All right, let's do this. So first things first, let's check that we are using the right version of Node. So I'm going to make sure I'm using Node 18 just for when we're installing all our dependencies. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new Rails app. So to do that, we're going to go Rails new, and then we're going to call this one Rails view components for the demo. And I am going to use Tailwind for CSS, of course. And then for JavaScript, I'm going to use ESBuild. Okay, going to hit that. We're going to let it do its thing. Install all the dependencies, and away we go. Make sure you don't have any errors or anything that you need to catch. Sometimes, if like for me, the first time I ran this, I was using the wrong version of Node, which is why I changed it, but it did fail. So make sure it does pass, otherwise you're gonna have all sorts of fun. So next thing, we're gonna jump into our directory. So Rails and view components directory. And then we're gonna open up our mate cursor or VS Code or whatever you're using. And I'll bump this up so we can all see. All right, so first things first, let's start a server here. So we're gonna run /bin dev to get that server started. All right, so we're running on port 3000. So if we now jump into our window here, we can see we are running Rails. Well done, you've passed test 1 server here. And we're gonna add our view component gem. So to do that, they have a little script here, so we can go Rails app template. So we use an app template, and then we're gonna go location, and we're gonna provide a website. So it's https://rails bytes, funnily named there, .com /script /ZJ that's OS 05. Now you don't have to be a loser like me. You can actually grab this off their website, and you just hit enter and let that run. All right. What do you want to call the shiny library? So that's just me being a rookie. I'm just going to copy and paste that in. Some people ask me to type things out, but let's just Control C out of that because that's not the right library. We just paste that in. We should be able to get the right one. It looks identical to me though. There we go. There must have been a character different. Ah, yeah, I've used a 0 instead of an O. Cool, that'll get ya. All right, here's the right one. So welcome to the interactive view component installer. Right, where do we want to store our view component? So for me, because it's a view, I feel like a component is a view. It's something you look at, like it's going to display. I think app front-end components, not the best because we don't usually call things front-end in a Rails app. We go app views. So I'm going to go with app views components. All right, so that's where I'm going to store them. Hit that. Would you like to use dry initializer? Dry initializer is pretty cool. It's like a way of writing less initializing scripts. So if I show it, oh man, what is going on here? That's not right. Yeah, we go here. And you can see, so instead of doing like initialize and then declaring your parameters, you can just do like param name or option name. So it just makes it much cleaner, less code. So I'm gonna say yes, let's go with that. What's the next thing? Do you wanna use stimulus? 100% we do. Do you wanna use Tailwind? Sure thing. Make our styling easier. And would you like to create a custom generator? Of course we do. What template processor? So I like to use ERB just because I'm comfortable with that, not the other two, Hamel and Slam. All right, so now it's gonna just install some gems and put them there for us. Now if we just have a quick look at what it's done, I like to see what things are doing. We can see in our gem file down here, we've got now the view component and the view component contrib library, which is really cool. That's the Evil Martians one, just makes it way better. And then the dry initializer here, all right? So that's looking good, we're all installed. So next what we're gonna do is we're going to move our controller view. So I'll explain why. So firstly is when we look at views, controllers just live in here. So if you had a, let's for instance say a users model, you'd have views users. Now, because we have this components directory, it's nice to organize things in a controllers directory. So we'd have views controllers users. And you can also, if you namespacing, if you were going to do views controllers v1, you go views controllers v2. So just create that distinction, just makes it easier to manage here. And then you have them all in the controller. So you know that views for controllers live in views controllers. I mean, it seems to make logical sense there. So what we need to do to enable that, we just need to change the view path. So we're going to go into our apps controllers, application controller. So it's apps controllers, this one here. And what we're going to do is we're going to just dump this in here. So it's the append view path, and then we're going to say Rails root join app views controller. So we're basically just saying the view path we want to use is this one here. So it's the views controllers path, okay? Simple enough. We also need to add that to application mailer, because what we're going to do here is we're going to add a new folder, mailers. So we're going to put our views for our mailers in here as well. It just keeps things really nice and tidy and organized, okay? So inside of app mailers, application mailer, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to go say append view path, Rails root join app views mailers. All right, that's it. All right, we can set that. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so next what I like to do here when starting out with these components is just modifying the generator, because I think the generator itself can create a lot of files that we don't use initially. And if you are going to use them, great, you can leave them in. But until then, I like to just get rid of them. And the files I'm talking about are the test files. So sorry, we need to make that true. So we want to skip test, yes. We want to skip the system test, and we want to skip the preview. So I'm not using previews right now. If you were using previews, you can turn this on. But I find like in the initial stages, like it just adds a bit of slowness. And until you actually have users and customers that is mission critical, we can probably avoid tests just to save a little bit of time. I am a big proponent of tests though. When you do have production customers, testing is imperative. So we've disabled them. And then also inside the templates folder here, so in lib generators view component templates, look for the component.rb.tt file, and then just get rid of this with collection parameter. I don't use that, and I find that it just adds a bit of overhead mess that I don't want to think about, so just get rid of that. All right, so now we've updated our generators, so it makes it much easier for us to generate our files that we want first try without having to delete code every time. Now we are ready to go. So let's create our first component. So we're gonna go Rails G view underscore component, and we're going to go button, the old classic button component. So we're gonna create that. And you're gonna see here, we're gonna get two files. So we're gonna get the components button, which is the component RB file, which is where like the logic lives. And then you got the component.html.erb file, which is where the view layer lives. So if we have a look now, that will be in app views components button component there and component.rb. All right, so there's our first component. Now we have a component, but we need to render it. So let's create a controller endpoint to do so. Let's set up this controller. So we're going to go into app controllers, and then we're going to create a new one called marketing controller, because this is basically just our marketing screen. I don't know what else to call it. Let's just go with marketing. It's all good. And then we're going to go here, class, marketing controller extends application controller, and we're going to render an index. And we don't have to say render index because Rails is smart enough to know what to do there. Now we're going to create the view for the render. So let's go back down here. We're going to go, it lives in app views controllers, and then we're going to create a folder called marketing. And then inside that, we're going to have index.html.erb. All right, and then all we're going to do in here is we're going to render button component.new. All right, that's all we're doing inside here. There, I need a bracket to close that off. Right, so this is the basic way of rendering a component. So pay attention to that, because we are going to change it with the view contrib, which makes it a bit cleaner and less typing. So we can save on that. Now we need to also add to our routes, right? So routes.rb, And we're gonna make our route marketing index, okay? So that's where we're gonna go first. So let's now go here. You gotta start your server, champ. So we run bin, dev, super important to always make sure you're running your server. There we go. Look at our sick button. It's looking amazing. So that's our component. That's how easy it is to make components. We basically finished the thing, you've implemented them. Great, but no, we're gonna make them better. So moving forward, we are going to add a helper to make like actually rendering these guys a little bit nicer. So inside of app helpers, and I generally tend to avoid putting code in here, right? I just find it hard when you want to refactor, but for things like this, I'm gonna make the exception, okay? So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna say new def component. So this is gonna be a component helper. We're gonna call component. We're gonna pass in the name, args, quags, and a block. And we are going to pass this like this. So we're gonna use that, and then we're gonna pop it in. Let me just paste it in here. I'll paste all the code because I don't wanna make a typo like last time. So we get rid of this. Get rid of this and get rid of this, and then I'll talk you through what we're doing. So we got the component, and so we're saying component equals the name. So whatever we pass here to a string, we're camelizing it, and then we're constantizing and then appending component. So for instance, if we had the string button, we would camelize it, constantize, and then add component. So the easiest way for you to visualize what this is actually doing is jump in here, open a new tab, run our mate Rails C, and then we can just go, let's just make sure, I need to put the string in first. I just want to make sure. So we're going to go button, right? That's what we're going to pass in as a string. And then we're going to take this guy and we're going to run, let me just make sure I copied the dot from here, chuck it in here, all right? And then see what happens. Can you see how that class is now button component, right? That's what we expect. That is the same as this guy, right? So it's the class name. So, but we can now pass in, basically what we're trying to do is we create a method where we can just pass in the string button, and then it's gonna append component, right? And you can also, the cool thing about this, you can append little slashes. So it just makes it way easier to work with. Let's jump back into our application helper. And then it's gonna call the render method, which you can see here, render. And it's gonna pass in that component. It's gonna initialize a new one. It's gonna pass in the args and the quags. Now, to be completely fair, I actually don't know what the quags are. So look, and it's gonna pass in a block, because we can do like render methods with these components where we can say do, and then we can have a block, and then the inside of the block is the content, right? So this is exactly how we'd render a button. It can be hello world like this, or, which I actually prefer if you're just using a simple string, would be hello world like that. So you can pass in blocks in two ways, right, with your components. So I'm gonna leave that like that for now. We've got a little application helper and good to go. All right, let's just double check. Everything still renders, perfect. Now what we're gonna do is we'll come back to our guy here, and we're gonna use the helper. We're gonna go component, and no longer with this nonce. See, that's a whole bunch of writing. We're gonna just change it to button, boom. And look at that, we're still running, everything works, but there's way less typing, right? So this will look better, and it feels better to work with. So this is one of the improvements that I really like from this library. Now you can also, what I was talking about is you can also, this supports stuff like this, right? So instead of doing this really long, ugly name, you just get to do slashes, which for me makes so much logical sense when you're trying to work with these things. All right. Now, what we're gonna also do is we're gonna jump into app views, components, and we're gonna jump into this guy again. And we're just gonna add in the application helper in case we wanna use this application helper method inside of a component, all right? So we just need to put that in there. Now we're gonna move on to adding our mate stimulus, all right? So we're gonna do that to start. Let's go here, back to the server. We're gonna go yarn, add, esbuild, Rails. Let me just double check, because that may have actually installed this time. I think I only needed to do that when we failed. Esbuild, no. Oh no, it's got esbuild there. Oh no, esbuild Rails. So esbuild Rails is actually not esbuild itself, but it's a little helper method for Rails to help load stimulus controllers. So you'll see where that comes in handy. So we do need to add this guy. Added that in. Now we should see that in here. Esbuild Rails. Now technically that could also be a dev dependency. but we're all good. Now what we want to do is we want to update or actually create, we don't even have one, but we're going to create a file called esbuild.config.mjs. All right, and then we're going to dump a whole bunch of code in there. So I'm just going to dump this in. I will push up this project so you guys can grab it and check it out. So get rid of these guys. Okay. So basically what this is just a whole bunch of config for us. It's loading this Rails helper thing, and this is why we have to do this. We got the watch directories, and then we are using the Rails plugin. That's why we have to create a custom config, because we actually want to use the Rails plugin here, okay? So literally this is just a copy paste, move on with your life. Don't worry about it too much. We want to update this build script. So at the moment it uses this pure esbuild app, but what we want to do instead is get rid of this, and we want to run node esbuild config, right? So it's going to run node on our config that we've just done. So this has done a whole bunch of extra work for us. And it's, so we just can do all that, right? So we can call that instead of pure esbuild. And that is that. Now, we want to also automatically load our stimulus controllers. So usually with stimulus, it's kind of annoying. You've got to go and like call or add them in manually, right? Like in this index, you got to register them. And you can do that every time you use the helper, it will automatically do this, but you end up with a whole bunch of lines of code here, which is a bit lame. So what I like to do instead is use this automatic loader. And I think there are problems with it. I have glanced at it, but look, for me, I've seen it working pretty well so far. And it seems to work fine on a pretty decent sized app. So what we're doing here is we're grabbing all the view component controllers from views components, and then whatever the folder is, so button, and then the controller. So we're looking inside this folder and just grabbing them, right? Then we're looping through them. And then I actually tidy up the name, because I don't like the name being this random long string. I just want it to be called video reviewer, right? So I replace all this and do a little bit of a tidy up and remove the controller.js. And it just allows us to call those controllers and find them easier without having all this other nonsense in there, right? And then we register. So here's the application register controller name, module default. And that is the same as application register, module name, and then default. Yep, same thing. We're just doing it through a loop automatically, okay? So that's all set up now. Also, we wanna just probably run bin dev again and just make sure we don't have any crashes. Good, so we wanna make sure that node is building and nothing's crashing, okay? So that is all working. Next up is setting up our styling. So we can actually move on to the more fun part of this tutorial, which hopefully hasn't been too boring. So if we jump in here, we now have our file. So what we can do is, let's just let's write out a button. And what we're gonna do here is content and button, right? So that's all we're gonna do, and let's just see what happens. Hello world, and you can see his little mouse is going, hello, I wanna click on that because that's now a button. We're gonna inspect it and have a look here, and you see it's a button, all right? These are new comments that I haven't seen before, must be in the newer version of Rails. So in here, what we wanna do is we just wanna pass in a class, because that's what we wanna do here, and we're gonna say it is BG Blue 500, font bold, text white, PX24 rounded, large, and I'm gonna go rounded large. I like to alpha sort these guys just to make my life easier. Boom, there's our button. We made a component, guys. Well done, amazing. But we're not done. So now what we want to do is we want to add some variants. We want to be able to, when you create a component, you want to have like primary, outline, ghost. I'm going to show you how to do that. So to get started, we need the Tailwind merge gem. So to install the Tailwind merge gem, we're going to go bundle, add Tailwind _merge. Let that run. And run our bin dev again just to make sure we're running. Now we also need to make sure, I probably shouldn't cancel this because we need to update our Tailwind config, and we need to include a few things. So currently we're only watching the HTML ERB files for changes in the Tailwind. We actually need to watch the other ones as well. So what are you doing here? So we need to add in not this, but we need to actually add in JS. I want to watch the controllers because sometimes you might use a class name in a controller. And we also want to add in the RB file, right? So let's just do this guy, sort him. So we've got views, components, JS, and the RBs too, okay? So basically I'm just saying watch this file. And then I also, when I add in a controller.js, which we'll do in a second, I want to watch that file as well. And you'll see why. Let's just reboot our mate Tailwind. Make sure we're all golden, looks like it. So now what we can do is let's go quickly add in a little bit more boilerplate here for our view components. We also want to include this guy called view component contrib. No, view component. I don't know why that does that. View component contrib. That's the guy I want. View helper. No, it's called style variants. Style variants. Okay, we want that guy. And then we want to go style config dot post process with do classes. So we're going to grab our classes and then we're going to say Tailwind merger, and then it's .new .merge classes .join space. Okay, so that's going to take all the classes and just do the Tailwind merge. You would have used this in React, you would have used this before everywhere. So that's all good. So we've got that, that's golden. Now we can move back into our button component. All right, so back here, Mr. Button. We're going to create a variant option. And we're going to default that, and you pass it in a proc. So it's default proc, and then it's going to be primary. Okay, so our default variant is called primary. Now we're going to set up our style. Okay, so what you first do is you do a base. So you do a base style, and these are defined like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab these guys. This is our base style. Chuck it in here. All right. And then from here, we're going to go like this. And we're going to say style. And we just do empty brackets. No, we don't do base like that. Now, if all thing works, this should stay the same, which it has. So it stayed like hello world. And it is just worth reading the docs here because you can actually do compound directives where you have two variants, and when those two variants are enabled, you can actually do different things. So primary disabled can actually change up the props or the style of the components. It's worth checking out the docs on that one. But for now, we've got our component running and everything's working. So we're gonna now add a variant called variant. And that is very confusing, I do understand, but it's just similar to basically I'm following this shadcn styling and to create the buttons, just so that everyone's familiar with that, can be familiar with this too. So inside of style, we've got our base, but now we're going to create one called variants, right? And that's going to be opened up, and then we're going to call it variant. And open that up, and then we're going to have primary. And if you've worked with components before, and building variants, this is a very familiar process. So what we're going to say is when it's a primary button, that's going to be this is our basically primary. We want the background to be this, and we want text to be white. Okay, that's our primary variant. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have another variant called outline, and that one is going to be not BG transparent, but we're going to have border 1, border blue, and then text blue. Okay, that's that one. And then we're going to create a ghost variant, which is not that, but just text blue. And then what we're going to do is we're going to remove the background and the text color from the base. Okay. And then finally down the bottom here, we're going to have so we've got our variants, and then we're going to have defaults. So let's just make sure it's here and goes defaults. and then open that up again, and its variant is primary. All right, I just hope I've put that in the right place. I think this might actually live outside here. There, all right. All right, let's see. So we've got our default variant now being primary. What we're gonna do here is open up 3 components. Save that, you should see 3 buttons, perfect. But now what we're gonna say is variant, primary, outline and ghost. Very much like React prop, right? You got your variant prop. So you think of it as a prop, these are your props. Now we got primary, outline and ghost. Now we have to update our button. So you can see at the moment it's just using the base style. What we wanna do is also, we wanna take in the variant style. So now if we refresh that, you can see I've made a mistake obviously here with one of these styles. The outline border 1. Oh, it's not border 1, there's no such thing as just border. There we go. So you can see we now have 3 styles. So we've just built a component that has 3 variants, all right? So this is how we get started with components. This is how we build our own theme library. This is, you know, I see a lot of people complaining that Rails doesn't have this, but we can do it very easily. Just have to put in some time. And I like to build my own because then my app has its own style and flavor. And yes, it takes a little bit longer, but when you've finished, it looks like no one else's. Okay, so that's this part. Now what we're gonna do, we've got that, and now we can move on to the stimulus controller. Okay, so we won't actually be doing anything crazy here. We're just gonna, it's proof of concept, show you how it's done. So first things first, back to our little helpers thing, application helpers. I'm gonna add another little helper here, which is the component identifier. And I use this so you don't have to write the name of the stimulus controller, because that can get really cumbersome really fast. And if you change the controller name, you have to go and change it everywhere else. So this way it's dynamic, right? So the way that this looks is I'm gonna grab it again. So it's grabbing a similar thing here, and we're gonna put this in here, and I'll talk you through it again. So let's fix this up. It's not a double end. So we've got a component identifier. We're gonna get the component, we're gonna constantize it. And then what we're gonna do is, I'm just checking this little difference here. It's a little bit slightly different, but it's very same thing. And then we're gonna call the components identifier. So we don't have that method right now, so we actually have to add it. So we're gonna add this bunch of code in here. So it comes after this guy, and we're gonna add it in. I'll talk you through it. So we're adding it to itself. We're adding a component name method, an identifier method, and then a class method over here. So we've got these things here. You can see, kind of see what it's doing, and it's just subbing underscores with things, and then every time you just go into a slash, we got a double, which is the stimulus naming convention. All right, so we got that. I grabbed that from the docs, so it's all there for you. And now what we can do is we can go into our button and go new file, controller.js, right? So you can see it's slightly different to JavaScript land, where you kind of do the view and the logic in the same component. Here, the logic is for the component is split outside. And like, I don't know, it's gonna be a pro and a con. It means you get to use HTML. You don't have to write JSX. If you don't like JSX, you can just you're using HTML. It's a pure HTML. And then you're having all your controller logic outside. So how do we write a stimulus controller? We just import controller from hotwired stimulus. And then we go here, we export default class extends controller. We don't have a target in this instance. We have a connect method. So this is called like on mount. You can think of it on mount. And then I like to also just say this dot element. So this dot element is the element that it's connected to. And then I'm also gonna add here a little function called trigger alert. And we're gonna take in the event. And then from here, we're gonna go destructure this. So we're gonna say target, and then we're gonna say data set message, and then we're gonna alert the message, right? So we're gonna put a little message on the button so that when you click it, it alerts. You know, I know, riveting stuff. We're gonna break the internet. But let's go and do this now. So we need to go here and we say data controller equals component identifier button, okay? So I like to just do it like a component name. That's just me. And then we're gonna add the action. So we're gonna say click component identifier button again, and then trigger. So whenever you click the button, we're gonna call that stimulus controller and with the action trigger alert, and then we're gonna have a message attached here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this message come from the component itself, so it's dynamic. So we can now define this in here as an option. So we're gonna add option alert message, and the default is gonna be hello world. Okay, so that's added now. And now what we can actually do is we can say here, we're gonna say, hey world, and this one's test world, and that's ghost world. Oh, I mean, look, hey, that's pretty fun, outline world. And this is primary world. All right, so you can use the default or you can pass one in. I'm just passing one in for all of them. Now, I have to just make sure, one thing you have to do is restart this so that it can register those controllers. It only does it once, which is good. And let's just make sure that we are actually connected. You can see here, the console log, button controller connected, and then you hover and it sees which element is connected to, right? Now when we click primary world, outline world, ghost world, okay? And that's that. So you can think of these methods that you pass in options as your props if you're coming from a React world. And we just use the data set. So Stimulus likes to use data set to set parameters on them. And then we can just use those, right? So we can use them through, and then anything else is just set, we can pass those props here. And because it's Ruby, you can do a whole bunch of cool stuff because it is, you can, interact with it how you will. You can pass in models. So if you want to have a component that brings in, for us, it could be a project, we can then grab that project and pull data out. It's super powerful, super flexible, because you are working with Ruby and you are working with all your Rails stuff. So you have access to that, right? You can do time stuff, you can do whatever you need. So that's all there, and we've added the actions and we have components. Now that for me is a win, we've done it. So we have added in our components, we've set them up. I really like this way of writing view components, and I'll show you how you generate nested. So for instance, if you wanted to do a nested button, we just go Rails G, view component, look at me, view component button, and I'm gonna say nested. Right? Hit that, it's gonna generate it in the right place, look at that. And then there's a nested component here, right? And then if we want to render this, let's say we wanted to render it over here, we can just do this, we'll remove all the props because we haven't added any. And we can just say button / nested. Now if we do it, there's the nested template. Look, it's telling us, hey, you need to do something here. But this is much cleaner than the other way, which would have been render, and then it's button nested component new, like this. And then if you wanted to pass in props, you have to open it up like this and then say prop message, right? And I guess I can do the same here just so that you get a like for like, right? So for me, I just found this so much easier to render like this. It just makes life so much better than this. This gets actually really hard to read because you got all this kind of extra nonce that you don't care about. And then the line widths get longer, etc., etc. So I really like this. You also get I like the component identifier. That just makes life so much easier trying to find the stimulus name. And a little hack for you to know is when you are working in here, you can go window.stimulus, and then you can go here and actually, so if I just run that, we can go router, and then we can go .modules by identifier. And what that does is it actually shows us what modules or stimulus actions are registered, right? So you can see here's the button component, here's the hello component, that's also registered originally when you start Rails. You can see the name here, right? So that's button. So we've made that real simple. But I'll show you what it looks like in a real app. So if we open up, I wonder if it'll happen inside of Clipflow for us. But if we open it up here, window.stimulus.router.modules by identifier, there it is. You can see how these names can get a bit unwieldy, and you don't want to be typing this out every time, right? This is like video reviewer, player annotation viewer, or look at this one, marketing page feature switcher component, and that's an old style one, right? So that's an old school one before using View Contrib. These are all pre-View Contrib, and these are all the View Contrib. So these are much cleaner, much tidier. It doesn't have all this like component and all this nonsense. That's because that's in a folder. It's rendered twice. I don't want that. So by using this View Contrib by the Evil Martians, it just makes life so much easier, tidier, etc., etc. So I hope you enjoyed my little rant there, but I'll catch you guys on the next one.